Welcome back to the Called to Defend live stream, where we give you existential dread for an hour and a half and then send you on your way for you to just have a lovely evening. I am Caleb, and fortunately, tonight I am not joined by Josh. He is off doing Josh things, and by that I mean he is off being a part of a ministry. Always a good thing, which is definitely why I said fortunately and not because I now get you all to myself. Nope. So tonight, as people kind of come in, I wanted to talk about Islam. And I wanted to talk about the cultural shift that is happening in two directions. Uh, and it's happening in the West. And so far, it's been a pretty big problem. Uh, Frequently, Andrew Clavin will open up his shows with a satire. He always does. And often his satires usually kind of make fun of the fact that Islam has really gained a foothold in the West. And certainly it's funny to an extent, right? At least jokes can be made about it. I think of, oh my goodness, what's his name? The famous atheist Alex O'Connor. I think of his intro to his debate with David Wood, where he says, hello, or as we in the UK say, and then he does the Muslim greeting. I can't recall it off the top of my head right now. So there are certainly jokes to be made about it, but I am noticing an increasingly troubling trend of Islam flourishing in the West. And it's it's becoming a bigger problem, I think, than we realize. As evidence of this, recently, Dearborn, Michigan has become an Islamic caliphate. Uh, and it felt like a very sudden shift, but at the same time, we should have seen it coming. There's a very heavy Arab population in Dearborn, Michigan. So much so to the point where actually they recently released a police patch that was going to have Arabic on it, right? So that the people who were getting help from the police could know and understand who the police were. That's a big problem. I am a big proponent of you should speak the language of the country that you live in. And the reason that I believe that, I think there's biblical precedent for it, certainly. The reason that I believe that is when you come to live in a country, you are supposed to adopt that country's values. And the reason I say that is because not too many people are leaving the West and going to the East, but many, many people are leaving the East and coming to the West. And the West, at its core, has Christian values, right? It was built upon Christianity. It was built entirely upon the Christian faith and the values and ethics that come with that. So, if you're coming from the East to the West, you should adopt Western values. But the problem is we are taking in so many people from the East that they're not assimilating to the Western values. They are coming and bringing their Eastern values. And the West, for some reason, has mistaken Christian charity as this, I don't know what the word is that I'm allowed to say on stream. Um, the word I want to say begins with a C and ends with an uck holding, right? This idea of we can't we can't offend them, right? We're supposed to be better. We're supposed to be enlightened. Therefore, we should share the values with them. Right? We should welcome them just as they are, and they shouldn't be expected to change, right? That's a lot of stress on them. Yes, change is stressful. Change is difficult. We should absolutely expect people to change. The gospel at its core is changing. It is radical. Right? The word radical means by the root. Right? So it's a radical change. It is supposed to fundamentally replace everything about you with what is godly. And that's why Paul says in Romans 12, do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed in the renewing of your mind. We should focus on converting people to Western values, and we are not. We are not, and we are getting places like Dearborn, Michigan. So, what exactly is so wrong with Dearborn? Well, outside of again them putting Arabic on the police patches, recently the mayor of Dearborn is a Muslim, and he is the man on this thumbnail. And very recently, like within the last week, he told a Christian minister that because the minister did not want to name a street after a Hezbollah fighter, reminder, Hezbollah is a terrorist organization. Right? They exist in southern Syria. They have committed atrocities against many countries, including America. Right? The Beirut barracks bombing, that was Hezbollah. They are an awful, awful organization. And the mayor of Dearborn wanted to name a street after one of its supporters. He effectively wants to name it after a terrorist. We don't do that here. Right? That's not a Western value. That's not something that we as Americans, we as Westerners, we as Christians do. We do not celebrate violence. Right? In Islam, violence is a good thing. And I'm working right now on a class talking about the Hadith. And in the Hadith, Muhammad says that jihad is the third greatest thing that a Muslim can do. The third greatest. The third best thing you can do in Islam is to go and spread it by violence. And go commit violence against people of other faiths and religions. That is a huge problem. Those are the values that we are importing into the West. And for this mayor to want to rename a street in honor of a jihadi, in honor of somebody who supported violence like that, is a big problem. And so the Christian minister in the community recognizes that, and he goes, and he wasn't rude, he wasn't impolite, he was actually quite kind. But he said, I don't feel as though we should have that. I don't feel as though, and I think that's literally the words he said, I don't feel as though. Right? Putting that in the gentlest way possible, whereas somebody like myself would have been probably a little bit more uncouth. But he says it very, very gently, very, very kindly. And the response of the mayor was just vicious. I mean, it was awful. The response of the mayor was, you are an Islamophobe. You are not welcome here. He tells the Christian minister, who has been living there longer than the mayor, that he is not welcome in his own city. And then proceeds to say that he will throw a parade for the day that the minister moves out of the city. Short of actually legitimately telling them, or telling him to just get out, or we will kill you. He says, we want you out, and we will celebrate when you leave. That is not Western. That is not Christian. But obviously the mayor is not Christian. He is a Muslim. And very quickly, Dearborn, Michigan is turning into a Muslim country, or a Muslim state. That's why I titled the stream the way I did. All right, it's Dishonoring the Crusaders. Back during the Crusades, which everybody loves to pretend were these horrible, awful things, they weren't. They were not actually that violent. They were largely, in terms of how wars were fought all throughout history, they were some of the most peaceful wars in history. Right, just go and do the research. We're not going to talk about that now specifically. That may be a topic that we investigate in the future. And if you'd like to see that, please let us know. I'm sure Josh and I would love to look into the history of that. At least I know I would. I'm sure Josh would too. But the Crusades were a pushback against this exact thing. Right. The Muslims had pushed all the way up in through Arabia, up through modern day Turkey, up past Greece, and had pushed all the way into Spain. They had made it to Europe. And they were going to push for France until, through what I believe is truly divine intervention and providence, a very small fighting force pushed them back. Like, the size of the armies should have made it an easy victory for Islam. But instead, the Christians prevailed. And that led to the Eastern Church asking for help from the Western Church for repelling the Muslims, pushing them back and retaking the Holy Land, which was a Christian nation for 6 centuries, or was a Christian region for 6 centuries. You know, it's difficult for us to think of the Holy Land as anything other than Islamic, because that's just what it has been for our entire lives, right? And for 1400 years. But it was a Christian land. First it was Jewish, then it was whole hodgepodge during the years of conquest, but it became a Christian land. I say for 6 centuries, the movement begins, and then it grows over the first 3 centuries, and then for the remaining 3 centuries, it is a strictly and purely Christian land. So when the Crusaders talk about, Deus Vult, as God wills it, they are talking about God willing, we will retake the Holy Land. We will retake it. Because it is, first and foremost, a Christian land. And the Crusaders fought so hard for that. So hard to keep the Muslims out of Europe, and then to insert Western values back into the lands that had been conquered. And so now, what we get is the West looking at the sacrifice of the Crusaders and welcoming in the very same people that they had fought against. And welcoming back the very same people they had tried to keep out. And doing so with open arms. Right? Evidence of this is the UK right now, like today, actually I think it might have been yesterday. It was yesterday. Put out a statement talking about how it's not a bad thing to marry your first cousin. I want to repeat that. The United Kingdom, the Western power, for 300 years, plus the cradle of Western civilization, and the beacon from which all Western values and beliefs have emanated for centuries, just said that marrying your first cousin is not a bad thing. That is not Christian. The Catholic Church actually prohibits marrying your first cousin. All throughout Europe, first cousin marriage was banned because of the Catholic Church's ban on it. Because of the ethics, the Christian Western ethics that dictate you should not marry your own family. Islam has no such prescriptions against incest. And given now that the Muslim population of the United Kingdom has exploded, and I mean exploded, it is on its way to a Muslim country if it's not already there. The very fact that they would say something like this tells you everything. Right? This was not just some like small media outlet. This was not some Islamic publication. This is from the top levels of the UK. They want Islam. They are opening it up. They are changing values that are centuries old in order to protect Islam, to protect people who want them subjugated, who want them dead. There was just a killing, a shooting at a synagogue in Manchester. I guarantee you this will not change anything. Right? And you can say it may not have been a Muslim, maybe not. Don't know all the details yet. But we know that Islam has targeted Jews in the past. I'm not saying they did here. It may not be Islam. But my point is, the synagogue shooting will not be mourned by almost half of the United Kingdom. It will be celebrated. Because there's a very famous passage in Islamic texts about the Day of Judgment. And it says that on the Day of Judgment, Jews will be hunted down and killed. And the Jews will hide behind trees and rocks, and the trees and rocks will cry out, "O Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me, come and kill him." Those are the type of people that the UK has welcomed with open arms. And it's not just the UK, it's France too. Right? People wonder why the UK and France were among the first two nations to want to recognize a Palestinian state. It's because they themselves are Muslim states at this point. The Crusaders fought so hard to keep Islam out of the West. And instead, less than 1,000 years later, the very same West is embracing it, is flooding the country with it, their countries with it. But it's not just in Europe, it's not just overseas. It's here in America too. Right, we talked about Dearborn, but we didn't talk about all of it. So at another town council meeting earlier this week, residents complained, I think it was early this week, might have been late last week or early this week. Residents complained of the Muslim call to prayer waking them up at 5 a.m. Right? For those who don't know, the Adhan, as it's called, the Adhan goes off 5 times a day. One of those is at 5 a.m. Eastern. The city actually has ordinances against loudspeakers before 7 a.m. And at the council meeting, this was recognized. I guarantee you that law will be changed. I guarantee it. Because the Muslims have the official power now. They have power. They hold the city offices. They can change that. And I guarantee you they will change it. Either they will allow loudspeakers before 7 a.m., or they'll do my guess, they will make a religious exception. And I am deeply concerned about the growing presence of Islam as indicated by Dearborn, Michigan. We have two Muslims running for mayoral campaigns in the largest cities of America. We have a Somalian man running in, oh my goodness, it's Minneapolis. I'm trying to think of the man's name. I don't recall what it is at the moment. But then, of course, we have Zoran Mamdani running in New York. And he's going to be the next mayor of New York. Now, I do think Mamdani is about as Muslim as I am. Right? But that does not mean that he will not promote Islamic values. And that kind of leads me into the broader point of the stream, which is this idea that the West is inherently evil. Because question mark. Right? It's step one. There are disparities in the world. Step two, question mark. Step three, West is evil. The reason I say that is because Zoran Mamdani refuses to denounce the phrase globalize the Intifada, which is a global call to murder Jews. Now, I'm just going to say right now, it's not, it's troubling, obviously, to call for the death of Jews, but it's not just a Jewish problem. A lot of people like to, how do I say this? A lot of people like to focus on anti-Semitism as if it's among the worst of hatreds. All hatred is evil. All of it is. The only hatred that's not is a hatred for sin. But the issue is not restricted to Jews. The issue, presently, is a hatred for the West. And Jews just so happen to be a part of the West. Right? A lot of people think that Israel-Palestine is just indicative of that region of the world. It's not. It's not. Your position on Israel-Palestine is more so about the West versus the enemies of the West. I am not going to sit here and pretend like Israel has never done anything wrong. I have deep problems with how this war has been fought. I should rephrase. I have deep problems with the things that the Israeli government has allowed during this war. That said, I understand that this is a war against the West. A lot of people in the U.S. who will chant about freeing Palestine could not find you Palestine on a map. They do not care. They would not last 30 seconds inside Gaza run by Hamas. They wouldn't last a day. But that is not the point. Right? Why do we see people who would be killed by the Muslim terrorists, by Hamas, in Gaza, cheering them on, right? I think Queers for Palestine. The famous line is, it's like chickens for KFC. And it's true. But why do we see that? Because it is the quintessential the West is evil issue. The reason I say that is I want to look at the claims made by the pro-Palestine side, by the pro-Hamas side. Let's say it how it is. Right, you can. I had a friend describe it to me as I'm pro-Palestine, anti-Hamas. Right, I want what's good for the Palestinian people, which is the removal of Hamas. Fair enough. But for the pro-Hamas crowd, right, the kind of people that chant, from the river to the sea, which is a call to wipe out Israel. Because the goal is from the river, the Jordan River, to the sea, to the Mediterranean Sea. That's Israel. They just want to wipe Israel off the map. I don't think any nation should be wiped off the map. I don't care if it's a Jewish nation. I don't care if it's a Muslim nation. No nation should just be genocided. But, not but, the reason we see this sort of omni-cause of hatred against the West, and the reason we see the chanting for Palestine, is because they have this idea that life is a zero-sum game. You only get ahead by putting others down. That idea is so distinctly un-Christian and so distinctly anti-West, anti-life, and anti-success. It has the opportunity to destroy the West. And I know that sounds scary, right? I opened the stream by telling you I would give you existential dread. This is where it's at. I'm not being hyperbolic there. The ideology has the potential and ability and means to destroy the West, because it is a suicidal ideology. This idea that the West must fall because you can't have one person be more successful than the other. All outcomes must be equal, right? That's what effectively that is. That's communism. It's socialism, right? The idea that all outcomes must be equal. You cannot have some people who do better than others, because those people who are doing better are only able to do better because they are putting down other people. That is the reasoning behind those cheering for Hamas, and that is the reasoning behind all of religious and cultural leftism. The driving force is essentially Nietzschean philosophy flipped on its head. Right? Nietzsche saw the Übermensch as something to aspire to, and that was to be done by any means necessary, even and especially if it meant putting people down to achieve said goal. Leftism takes that and it adds communism to it. And it says the Übermensch is a thing that exists and has gotten there by putting people down, and the response to that is not to elevate people, but to drag the successful down. To make sure that those who have succeeded in life now begin to fail. Because if those successful people fail, then the people who have failed will succeed. The problem is it completely ignores the culpability of people. The what's the word I want to use here? Not guilt. The responsibility. The responsibility of people to their own actions. Your actions have consequences. And that is something that the enemies of the West, those who hate the West, do not understand. Actually, I disagree. I disagree with myself there. They understand it perfectly fine. They don't want it to be real. They don't want it to be the case. The problem is reality never loses. Right? No matter what, reality asserts itself, and it lives in and thrives on truth. And truth is undefeated. It will always be true that your consequences have action, or your consequences of actions. Your actions have consequences. It will always be true. No matter how much you try to make everyone equal, everyone will not be equal. Because some people do not want to work hard. And if you do not want to work hard, you will not be successful. I'm sorry, that's reality. Life is not a zero-sum game. If I make money selling a product that I myself make, nobody is hurt by that. Right? Let's say that I come up with a great invention that makes me billions of dollars. My ability to do that does not inherently harm anyone. Pardon me. But the problem is a lot of people think it does. A lot of people feel very put upon because others are successful. And it's this weird sort of horseshoe theory, right? Where you'll have people on the right, pardon me, sorry, usually the irreligious right, who will say, because A is successful, B is unsuccessful, and I am B, right? Because this big shadow cabal of evil people who run the world, they are successful, and they are successful at my expense, right? There's some big conspiracy that I know is just there, and I can't find the evidence of it because they've covered it up so well, and that is the evidence for it. And then there's those on the left that say, because there are successful people, period, that's why I'm unsuccessful. Right? Because Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or insert billionaire here, Warren Buffett if you feel the need. Because insert billionaire here is successful, I am unsuccessful. And they got successful because they made me unsuccessful. No. No, I'm sorry. No, that's not logical. You need some kind of connecting evidence, right? We go back to step 1, there are disparities. Step 2, question mark. Step 3, the successful are evil. That is a distinctly un-Western thought. That is a distinctly un-Christian thought. A lot of people like to say that the Bible condemns having money. It does not. It condemns mammon, the worship of money, the following of money, the obsession of money. But Abraham was a wealthy man. Job was a wealthy man. David and Solomon was one of the wealthiest men of all time, if not the wealthiest. He had vaults and treasures beyond imagination. That was not inherently sinful. That, in and of itself, is not a bad thing. But the worship and the love of money is the bad thing, right? People always miss that quote. They will say that money is the root of all evil. It's not. That's not what Scripture says. Scripture says the love of money is the root of all evil. And for the West to be embracing this idea that it is in fact money, it is in fact success, that is the root of all evil, when they have benefited from tremendous success at the expense of no one. Right? The West did not put people down. A lot of people like to say that, oh, because we colonized people, the West colonized people, that's why they got successful. You're only able to colonize people if you're already successful. I hate to break it to you. You can only be strong enough to colonize people if you have been successful enough. If you are strong enough. The weak do not colonize. The poor do not colonize. It is only the strong and successful. And in doing so, the West spread some of the best values that we have to offer. Right? There's an article that came out a while ago now. It was talking about uh, some archaeologist who had found an altar that was used for human sacrifice. And they called the article, I kid you not, called it non-violent human sacrifice. Peaceful human sacrifice. Which, like, are you kidding me? But that's the idea, right? It was that the barbaric West came in, and how dare they stop these peaceful human sacrifices? How dare they stop the non-violent murders? Who are we to say that the West is a good thing? They stopped cannibalism. How awful. Right? This idea that somehow telling people about their sin is oppressing them. And telling people that they need to not do bad things is putting them down. When in actuality, if you lived in the society that did those bad things, you would hate it. Right? If you as a Westerner were dropped into ancient ancient Aztec and Mayan culture, that's what I was trying to spit out. A, you'd probably be killed. But B, let's say you weren't, you would be horrified. You would be horrified as they carved out a child's heart. And you would be rightly horrified. The reason that we have this idea is because we have rejected our Christian fundamentals. We have rejected our Christian basis and ethics and our desire for God. The reason that we cannot seem to grasp the ideas that people need to, the reason, how do I want to say this? I guess the reason that we cannot seem to grasp the idea that people are successful not off of the backs of oppressing others, but because sometimes you just have good ideas that make you successful. Right? And because Christianity at its core is a successful ideology. Because it is true. Because reality is successful. Because truth is successful. And Christianity has flourished because it is true. And therefore it is successful. But if we reject Christianity, we end up with an unsuccessful society. We end up with a society that says you are inherently evil for being successful. You are inherently wrong for being successful. So how do we fix it? How do we get from the mindset that this oppressor oppressee mindset that victimization is necessary for success, we have to turn back to Christ. And we are seeing that shift. So we talked about the shift of people towards Islam. I now want to talk about the shift of people away from Islam. As many foreign Muslims as are being imported into the West, there are even more deconverting from Islam. There are just as many who are apostatizing. So much so that Islam is facing a problem that the caliphate and the imams and the sheikhs have labeled the avalanche of apostasy. So what do we do with that? We push harder. We fight harder. Right? There's a shift away from Islam. The internet is devastating for Islam. Things like this are devastating for Islam. And we need to push harder now. We need to spread the gospel more. We need to speak up as Christians for political values. Not political in the sense of, left and right, Democrat, Republican, whatever, Labor or Conservative Party, whatever you want to call it. Not that political. Political as in public. We need to speak up for Christian values in public ways. In the body politic. We must focus on the gospel. We must push back against Islam because we are seeing this shift. We are. The media and Muslims will tell you differently. But the fact of the matter is, Islam is dying in the West. And it's dying fast. And there are a lot of countries that are importing a lot of Muslims who then leave Islam and become Christians. Many become atheists too. But many become Christians. And so, we need to then do what the Christians did in Dearborn, Michigan, during it full circle. They came and they protested peacefully. There weren't very many of them, but there were enough to get the point across. It says, as much as you don't want us here, we are here. This is our country. These are our values. We're going to fight for them. We are not going to leave. We are not going to lay down and die quietly. That is not what Christ has called us to do. He called us to go and make disciples of all nations, even the Islamic ones like the UK and France. Well, thank you for joining me for this shorter stream. It's going to be shorter because, I don't have a co-host to really bounce ideas off of, get thoughts from. I don't see anything in the live chat. If you guys want to leave comments, please feel free to. If you want to hear more about this topic, we definitely can. I would like somebody probably to talk to bounce some ideas off of. But please, guys, be bold for the gospel. Be bold for Christ. Go out and spread the good news. Make disciples of all nations. Because together we can stop this invasion. We can honor the memory of the Crusaders. Not by doing more crusades. At least not physical, carnal crusades. But by doing spiritual crusades. By pushing back. By ensuring that our values remain our values. That the West stays as the West. And if we do that, we will be following the commandments of Christ. Thank you all for joining. Please feel free to like and subscribe and share this around to anybody who you think it might be helpful to hear. And if you guys would like to see more on this topic or maybe other topics, please just leave it down in the comments below. With all that said, Lord willing, guys, I will see you next time. Bye.